I'm going to call this work session to order on election update. I'm the chair of the Ethics and Election Committee for a few more weeks. But call it order, and let's go around the table and identify everyone in attendance. Ms. Tucker.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Tim Steele, Assembly.
Big Train Assembly.
Bernie Hall.
Bill Evans.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
Amanda Moser, Clerk's Office.
Madam Clerk, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So we wanted to give you an update, and we've got two things that we're going to talk to you about. Amanda's going to focus on an update for this election, and I just wanted to touch base with you on some broader management issues that we've been working on over the last year to address issues that have probably been ongoing for a number of years in elections. And, you know, I've got four things that I'm going to talk to you about. I usually do threes. I really like to do threes so that we do three, but unfortunately we have our fourth today. So the four things that I want to talk to you about are procedures, space, communication, and then succession planning. And so on the first one, on procedures, we worked really hard since the last election to document some really detailed procedures on some of the different election processes that happen. And I think we've done a really good job on that, and some of the procedures are just very good. And the focus has been to look at the handoffs from one team to the next team. And we've really watched that to make sure that we're accounting for all of the ballots in those processes and all of the election materials. There are things besides ballots in there. We've added some receipts and some accountability reports to those. So I just wanted to let you know about that. When we were looking at these procedures, one of the things that happened is we discovered that a group that we call the by mail board was essentially doing the same thing that the Election Commission was doing. And we just kept looking at this process and saying, yeah, we're doing this twice. And the doing it twice had some consequences. We were moving the ballots and then moving them back again. And then we also had to have space. And the space that we used for the Election Commission was the Ombudsman Conference Room. There were like 5, 6, 7 people, computers, and a bunch of ballots. And we worked with the Election Commission and the by-mail board, and we've just eliminated the commission reviewing those ballots since the by-mail board was already doing it. And so that leads into that second issue, space, so which has been a problem for us. So we're addressing one of the space issues that we've had with this change in procedures. The next issue is communications. So we recognize that communication is tough because there are, 650 election workers, and we're all across the city. They work for a day. We've got a small group at City Hall that works, sometimes from like 4 months to like 2 weeks or things like that. But communication between those different groups, like the by-mail board, the commission, the supply team, we have ballot testing, so all of these different teams. So Amanda started training all of the election workers. So we had them all in one room, and they all trained together with the commission. It was the first time the commission was invited to that training too. And as a result, one of the thoughts that I had was, some of these people that probably saw each other passing in the hall, they might not have ever met each other before, and now they're all in training together. And so we think that was a big success to let people know what all these people are doing in City Hall. Another thing that we did is we designated team leads for these different groups. And so we've always had a chain of command in the election pod or the election group. And it was, unfortunately, we kind of focused on the top and forgot about the bottom. If anyone had an issue, they were to go to Amanda, and if they didn't like Amanda's response, they were to come to me, and then if they didn't like my response, I go to the municipal attorney and the policy says the municipal attorney's decision is final. And we have actually implemented that in prior years. The part that we didn't have though is some of the, 20 or 30 or so election workers didn't always know who to go to. And so we think by designating team leads that we have addressed that problem. And people know who to go to and know how to address that chain of command. A third one is we've started some regular team huddles, and I've actually done a little team huddle newsletter with everybody's name and their contact number on it to let people know who is in this these team leads and what our group is doing. Amanda made a joke to me earlier today when we were talking about this, that all of the team leads and the election workers know what each other's favorite ice cream is, because that was one of our little icebreakers that we did. So the last thing that we've got in communication is that we've got, if you've been into the clerk's office, I don't know how it got this name, but it's called the election pod. And it's the little spot in the middle of the clerk's office, and there are 4 election workers that are stationed there. And of course, some of them are temporary employees and aren't going to be there all year, but that's where they're stationed right now. And so we're hoping that increases communication between them. So I think you can kind of see on these issues with procedures, the space issue and the communication issue, what we've really tried to do is address problems that we've had in prior elections, and just elections in general. And the idea that we're trying to get is for the goal for all of these election workers is to see that the big picture goal is to make sure that every vote counts until certification. So that's kind of where Amanda and I come in, but we want them to be making sure that we're successful. And I think we can do that by communication in these procedures. So the last one, my number 4, was succession planning. And, we've been working on succession planning in the clerk's office probably since I started. And it's time to start moving to succession planning in elections. And over the last 9 months, we have been working on that. Unfortunately, we have this thing called marijuana and vote by mail and our regular duties that we've kind of been busy with. And so we've made some progress, but we need to make more in that area. And we have a project manager for vote by mail. Marijuana is just about ready to launch, if I can say that. And Lisa Schlusner has been appointed to our 2nd deputy clerk position. And so Amanda and I are ready to do a little bit more intensive work to make sure that the clerk will be the backup for the deputy clerk on elections. And that's my management update to you. I think I may have promised this to you in an email a year or so ago, not quite, but almost a year ago, when we were talking about, the aftermath of the last election. We just said we'd give you an update, and that is your update. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Mr. Horn?
I have a question and a comment. Number one is that when you're talking succession, would you mean that, I know Amanda's been primarily elections for, I guess, since she was deputy clerk for us in the area. Will it be transitioning to Lisa in the next coming election so that there's, I guess you'd say, some training for backup in case the proverbial Mack truck hits or Amanda decides she's gets wooed away by somewhere else? I mean, how is this, do you see done succession plan?
Well, the current succession plan is for the clerk to back up the deputy clerk. And I've talked with a couple of people about it, and one of I think the best comment that I got was from someone who said, well, the code says the clerk is responsible for the election, so that makes sense. that hasn't been the model in the office, and I'm sure you know that better than I do, since you've been here longer than I have. But I think that it's a good model going forward, and that is what we'd like to have for the model. As far as swapping, when I hired Amanda, we did talk about swapping. Unfortunately, just at this moment, I haven't discussed this with Amanda, I don't think that's a good idea, and I will tell you because the work that Lisa does is so incredibly detailed. The work that Amanda does is so incredibly detailed. They both have a pretty good idea of what each other does, but I don't think that would be a good swap. I think that would be a difficult swap for right now. I think there certainly could be changes, like you could take a chunk of someone's job and assign it to someone else, or a chunk of my job. You could do all of those, but I don't think it could be a swap.
No, and I wasn't understanding, it was just, when you say succession planning, usually it's, so someone's prepared should someone promote, transfer, move away, or differently.
That is the plan, but the plan is it'll be me, the clerk, whether it's me or not, I guess, let's put it that way.
Okay, and then secondly, more of the comment side, and that is, since I've been here, certainly there have been challenges come election day, and generally post-election day, in a couple of elections. That we do elections in this municipality every year is certainly something that is, I don't think that there's anything more important than getting it right, is just to have the trust the public puts in us to make sure that our elections are held very well. So to that end, I commend your office. I know prior to you as well, and Ms. Mosier, she's come on and done just nothing but fabulous work on the elections. And I really am excited about the vote by mail coming forward, and I continue to, even after my service on this body, to do what I can in support of that.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, one thing I'll say, there are going to be challenges in every election. And Amanda's going to talk to you a little bit more about challenges and why there are challenges in every election.
Because people.
Yeah, I want to expand a little bit, Paul, with you. Our clerk is using the term succession planning. I've always looked at it more as cross-training.
Right.
So that no one individual there is the only one that knows what that job is. We were just murdered in 2012 because of the fact that we lost some key individuals rather rapidly there, and there was nobody cross-trained to step in. So with this being set up the way that it is, with Amanda handling elections and Lisa handling others, the clerk is going to be the go-to person at all time. And reality is, if for some reason either Lisa or Amanda should move on, take another position, which I hope that never happens, that they stay right there, there's somebody that knows how to do that job to train the individual that follows them. Because we're certainly never going to see the clerk become the election clerk. I mean, the clerk's job is being the clerk, but she gets some clarity that she'd be all-knowing. But by the same token, with that cross-training, if something happens to Lisa, then Amanda's got the knowledge to be able to help someone learn that job and vice versa. And we're doing that through every level. It's not just elections, but it's to make sure that every individual that we've got on that staff, if anything should happen to them, there's somebody that can step in and do that job on a routine basis. Mr. Training.
When I went to the clerk's office, we discussed this with Heidi's position. There was a time period when Heidi was so critical, if she had left, that clerk's office would have shut down. Thanks to the clerk, we now have multiple people trained on what Heidi does. We still miss Heidi when she's not there, but it's not a stop item that all the work stops. It moves on. Anything on that, Barbara?
I can just say thank you all for your support because it's meant more staff, and I appreciate that. And then one thing I'll add to Mr. Hall's comment about succession planning is it also involves me training Amanda to do my job, so that if something happens to me, and, you know, not surprisingly, 2 summers ago, I was out unexpectedly, and Amanda stepped up and covered for me for 4 weeks, you know, and it was fairly transparent. I think it was a lot of extra work for Amanda, but it was fairly transparent to the assembly, and that's what we want to make sure happens.
All right. I just wanted to give a quick update on a few things going on with the current 2016 election. I'm going to talk a little bit about our ballots this year. I always like to take this opportunity to address the split precincts that we have here within the municipality of Anchorage. So this, I will say one of the proudest work that I've done with the elections is we have worked on color coding in order to identify these different splits. So this is this year's different ballots based on color coding, and you can see West Anchorage is all voting on the same ballot style, same for Midtown. Mostly for East Anchorage, there is a part of East Anchorage that is part of Chudiak, Eagle River, downtown, part of South Anchorage, but when we get to the hillside is where we begin to see a lot of different ballot styles. And this is happening for various reasons, but mostly because of the bonds and the limited road service areas. So we currently have 4 bonds that are impacted by service areas. That is the fire bond, the park bond, the road bond, and the police bond. Not everybody within the municipality of Anchorage lives in the Anchorage Road and Drainage Service area. It stops right here at Elmore and Yarman, and you can see moving this way there's a lot of this green color. That is for folks that are inside the park and fire service area but outside the Anchorage Road and Drainage Service area. Some of these other colors are for the limited road service areas, and as we get at this line right here coming up mid-hillside is both a park and fire service area, so it creates some interesting splits right in precincts where you'll have folks that are in Rabbit Creek View, limited road service area, and in park and fire, and then these folks are outside park but still in fire, and then these folks are outside park and fire, and these folks are outside park but in fire. So it just kind of creates 3 different ballot styles for folks that are all in the Rabbit Creek limited road service area. So we do get some of those more interesting splits when those lines start crossing. So this year's election, we have 5 assembly members on the ballot, and we have 48 different ballot styles. The other really interesting thing that's happening with this election is in the Chudiak, Eagle River area, we have 6 streetlight service areas. I have precinct 965, which has 4 of the 6. These are little areas that want to be part of the Eagle River streetlight service area. And so this precinct is going to have 6 different ballot styles, and 4 of them by the streetlight service areas, and the other 2 are by the inside Anchorage Fire Service area and outside Anchorage Fire Service area. The interesting thing about these streetlight service areas is they are having a pretty big impact on our elections across the entire city. Because of that additional ballot language on those 6 different ballots, it has bumped us to a 14-inch ballot, which increases our election costs by about $5,600 by having these street light service areas. Additionally, we ran our first ad in the paper with the notice of election, and unfortunately we got some feedback from the public that they were frustrated that the language was too small and they couldn't read it because it was so much. So we are going to have to purchase a second page for our next ad, which is going to be about another $6,000. And those are just some of the costs that I can kind of quote off the top of my head. We had to hire extra workers, provide extra supplies, and so some of these things are pretty expensive. And then the other thing that it's really important to talk about is as we create more of these smaller areas that only a limited number of people are voting in, so I'm going to talk about this little orange part here. There's only about 22 registered voters here in this part of, and the problem is I have to provide ballots for these folks at their precincts, if they vote by mail, if they vote at Shugiak Eagle River Senior Center, Lusac Library, City Hall, UAA, or the airport. So when we have these really small splits, for like 22 people, I'm going to order about 200 ballots. And that is one of the complications of our ballot order is instead of just having this whole section, it's really easy to identify and order by 70%. But as we start breaking it down in these smaller little areas, it complicates things further. And I will say that I'm data driven, and I've been collecting data over the last couple of years. And so each year my ballot order grows as I like to compare more information. And one thing that's been very helpful is working with AWU, the GIS department there, because they have been able to help me identify specifically how many number of people live in these areas. I used to just guess. And so I will take you to Sequoia Estates is a limited road service area out here in Hillside. And I never knew how many people lived out there. I've always just sort of eyeballed it and guessed. It's right here, this blue part. And I always used to order 100 ballots to be delivered for these folks here at their precinct on election day. With the work that the GIS crew has done, I am now able to identify that there's 55 registered voters in this area, and I'm able to order a more specific number of ballots so we don't have the overages. And this is, I will say, part of the challenges is part of some things that led to the challenges is in 2012 is when you are breaking down all of these really small splits out here of making sure you have sufficient of all the different types of ballots that you're going to need. So that is my first update, and just to give you an idea, the second part of that update, so with that 14-inch ballot style, and after we completed the ballot order, we then transitioned into testing the ballots. And I will tell you right away, we had problems with both the AccuVote machines and the memory cards. We borrowed this equipment from the state. This equipment was purchased in 2000. Optical scan equipment typically has a life cycle of about 10 years. We're in 2016, and that is just sort of what you will hear folks when they're talking about elections. So it is, we are working with equipment that has challenges, but right away we had a significant number of memory cards that needed to be, batteries be replaced or replaced. We also had significant issues with the AccuVote machines themselves, especially the rollers that grab the ballots weren't working and some other challenges with that. We have communicated this to all of our training classes. One of the changes we made after the 2012 election was we used to have 4 training classes with about 150 workers in each. We now have 14 training classes with about 40 workers in each, and so it's a huge undertaking for the clerk's office to do that number of trainings, but we're really able to clearly communicate messages to individual workers when there's 40 people in a classroom setting instead of 150 in an auditorium. We talked in every single training class about the challenges they might anticipate with their AccuVote machine or their memory card, and we've also staffed some extra workers here at City Hall on election morning. It's happened in the last couple of years. It happens occasionally where we have memory cards or AccuVotes fail. We are able to get new ones out. There's procedures in the manual for how the election workers handle it. We just think it's going to increase. So just to give you an idea, we had 6 memory cards fail the runoff election, and we had 2 or 3 AccuVotes, and I just think that we're going to see a higher number for this election. We have seen a higher number of requests for absentee by mail ballots. So we have our absentee by mail board. They're working diligently to get those all out. We have some challenges with the remodel at the library. We've worked very hard with the crew over there to set up a plan for early voting to take place there. We are going to send out a press release on Monday. We have communicated to our workers, and our workers have been working closely with the library to be able to assist voters as they go in. And then I will say that I traveled to King County this past November, and I traveled to Washington, and I was able to visit with King County, Thurston County, and Pierce County to explore vote by mail. And in that exploration of vote by mail, I was able to see some great things that worked with their processing vote by mail that we've brought back and included in our procedures. And included in that is the team huddle that Barbara talked about earlier. It's a great way to understand what's happening in all the different groups, especially here in City Hall. We have folks that are working in 105, 155, 240, clerk's office, and then additionally sometimes in Daryl's space. So it's easy to not know what's going on in all these different spaces, but having a team huddle, especially as we get busier, we'll have them daily. We'll really be able to identify what's going on where. The next thing we have included is the colored lanyards. Team leads have a specific color. Our temporary workers have a different color. Election commissioners have a different color. And if we have public or media that is there, they will also have a color. And it's just a great way for someone to easily identify who is in what role. And it's helpful for our workers to know to go to somebody in one of the teal lanyards. They're either a team lead or the clerk's office staff. Additionally, we are focusing on an agile workforce with our election officials. So we currently have the supply team, the by-mail board team, the election commission, but to communicate where folks need assistance. So this past week, the supply team has been very busy getting ready to get the supplies for our precincts. And so some of the folks from the by-mail board have been assisting with that. And likewise, when the by-mail board gets very busy, we'll be able to have workers assist them. And that was part of the election worker training that we held a couple weeks ago. One of the feedback that we got from our workers last year, especially as we were doing a postmortem on what some of the challenges we had, was sometimes folks didn't understand the roles of everyone in City Hall. And so it was helpful for us to bring everyone in to talk about what was happening in all the different roles and to really reinforce that we are all election officials working on the same goal. And then in closing, I will say that I've worked in elections since 2010, and nothing's ever been the same. We've encountered new challenges each year, and that's part of the job that I love, because I love solving problems. And so there's always something new, and we've had everything from dogs in the polling location, we've had issues with religious signs being covered up, we've had 2 incidents of assault. So there's always something, and there's always the opportunity to pivot and react and address these concerns. So thank you for your attention.
Plus,
Thank
there was
you.
parking problems at one precinct too.
Oh yeah, that
That's
led
true.
to an assault.
Yes.
Mr. Train?
There was a candidates forum this week, and I was so impressed with Amanda's response to a gentleman who wanted to complain about the election process. And he berated her for about 10 to 15 minutes. No, she smiled and said, "We'll take care of that, thank you very much." But you would have thought she would like to have found us hammered hitting with it. But she handled it extremely well. You should be very proud of the staff we've got. They handle obnoxious people really well.
It's part of the job.
So thank you.
And that's just
You did a
assembly
great
members.
job.
Anybody else?
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Amanda told you about the problem here. And I think it's time for us to talk about, to the policymakers, that we need to pay attention to this as a policy issue. So what happened in January? I got a call. When do we have to get this on the assembly agenda to get it on the ballot? January 12th, public hearing January 26th. I'm just giving out this information. Then I get a call from Muni Legal. You're not gonna like this. There's gonna be 6 street lighting districts on the, oh well, you know, so they get on. But in hindsight, I think we all need to take a pause and say, do we really need to introduce this on January 12th? Do we really need this on the ballot for April 5th. And I think we need to slow down and tell people there may be other options. This would have been a perfect by-mail election, even though, you know, we're talking about a different process when we're talking about a full by-mail election where you mail ballots to every registered voter in Anchorage. We could certainly do a small by-mail election to voters in a discrete area. And I'm asking you, please help us ahead of time. And let's start thinking about these issues instead of when they end up being presented to the assembly, that we just automatically process them. Because Amanda's telling you, this costs at least $11,000. And we could have done that whole election for a fraction of that for the street lighting service areas. So that's a policy issue. Is there anything that I missed?
I just wanted to add one other thing. I spoke about the 22 registered voters in one of these streetlight service areas. My concern is that when you have such a small area of only 22 voters, you know, when we look at voter turnout across the municipality of Anchorage, it's close to 20% sometimes. So if you have 20% of registered voters that vote, of these 22 registered voters in this one specific area, it pretty quickly identifies how people are voting. Because they are on a specific ballot style 48, different than any other one. And that, when you break it down to such small areas, it really eliminates the opportunity for a resident to maintain that private vote. And there's other areas in these limited road service areas where I have a lot of concerns about that too, because some of these also have a very small number, and some of them have very low voter turnout. Villages Scenic Parkway has maybe 60 registered voters, and so when you're just seeing these very small areas, it is disconcerting as an elections administrator to maintain a voter's secret vote.
I had a problem actually when we were creating these. I read through it, I think, now why are they doing this? And it's just, in my mind, it's just to be novel or unique, to, you know, have control over your own particular area. But we've got that problem there. We've got that problem down in South Anchorage where you have these little bitty jurisdictions, if you will. And I'm not sure how we get away from it unless we just say, no, you can't do that. You got to join a bigger group of some sort. But anyway, every time we do this, it causes some issues. And whether it's worth it economically in terms of everybody's time and effort, I don't know. I mean, a lot of those folks are doing it because they can.
Anyway. Mr. Horner?
Well, this comment is, and I agree with Ms. Jones in her assessment of policymakers making a decision whether it should be one type of an election versus another. And I believe, and we were discussing this on the vote by mail, going to citywide vote by mail, which may, in fact, address everything. I'm not positive that it may, in fact, address everything, because I would assume that we would then switch to 100% ballot requirement, because we're either mailing it to 100% of the voters, or we're asking them to download however we're going to deliver that ballot to them for voting. And so Ms. Mosier may be able to address how they do it in Washington. But my point is that following through this is, until that time, and perhaps it's moot, but until that time, I believe the code actually speaks to an election shall be held in person or by mail. I believe we are already authorized to be able to hold certain elections by mail. Am I wrong on that?
Service area elections.
We're allowed to have service area elections by mail.
That is in current code, yes, if the assembly passes a resolution.
But I mean, what's in the actual code, I thought I read the last time we were having a discussion, when we were presenting the resolution in support of Vote My Mail. I think it was one of the questions that came up, and I actually read, and maybe I'm wrong, so maybe that's a question of legal, but I thought that at some point, we could direct as a body that on those small areas, or even the road service areas, that it could be a by mail versus, on a ballot that costs extra money and splitting all these precincts and for the integrity of the election. So it wouldn't be 70% of the printing of that, it would be 100% of the people in that service area. You'd mail it to them, whether they returned it or not, that's your return, that's your participation.
That is correct, Mr. Holman.
Okay.
The one thing I would like to comment about, this problem will not go away with by-mail elections.
Exactly.
Because remember, she still has to do a 14-inch ballot. That means that the postage is gonna increase. She still has to pay for the extra $6,000 for the ad. That is not gonna change just because we go to an all-by-mail election. What we're asking you to do is what you said, Mr. Honeman, one small by-mail election for service areas. So it's a separate from the general election. And then the other part is, as Amanda said, if you do this citywide, you don't protect the secrecy of the ballot. So if you do a small one, nobody is even gonna probably even, it's not even get reported, so.
So a follow to that, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I'm hearing you right, would this be on a different date?
Yes.
Yes.
So we could do, let's throw it out there, we could pick the month of June for service area vote. Am I right?
You could pick any month or any day or any.
End of the year or whatever.
Yes.
So, okay.
Mr. Reyes?
Before we go too far down that road though, well, I appreciate, the cost savings that would be incurred in this. It seems like though, but we are running on a municipal election in April. So we have to get ballots for everybody in the world. And if we run separate service area elections, we're still running the municipal election. So the cost savings you're talking about, or maybe it's gonna save money on the municipal election, but you're gonna be spending money on each of these service elections. And I don't know, maybe we can calculate exactly how that would work out. It would be, spreading the confusion out over, different periods, so each one is a little less confusing. Makes sense to me, but that 6,000 or whatever it would cost us for this thing, we're still gonna have some part of that, because we're gonna have to still do an election for these people.
So through the chair, if I may respond to that.
Mhm.
My specific concern is with the streetlight service areas. Although the limited road service areas create additional ballots and stuff like that, the cost specifically is not as significant as what the streetlight service areas is costing us this year. And that's specifically because with the limited road service areas, it is a small part of the ballot to add someone's name. It's like an inch. But the streetlight service areas text was significant. It was 2 paragraphs, and that's what caused the bigger ballot style. And so, although, yes, there are some areas where I have concerns with some of the limited road service areas, my biggest concern specifically is when we're adding these small streetlight service areas. And yes, it would be less expensive for us to run a special election for these 22 people than to have it on our ballot. Because to create ballots for 22 people and just directly mail them out, I'm purchasing 200 ballots for 22 people. And so these would be less expensive if we had them as a separate special election. This potentially would not for the Hillside area.
And if you did mail ballots, how many would you have to purchase? It'd be more than 22, because don't they have the ability still, how we're talking about it, of still like voting absentee or voting, or is that just all eliminated?
It would be interesting to see if we were to run a streetlight service area election, specifically how we would do it. But I would say that my guess was that it would be significantly less than the $11,000, and that is costing us this year.
And on the if I may,
Mhm.
Chair, we had to go to the 14-inch ballot. Are we just going to the 14-inch ballot for these areas?
All across the city.
There was no way of just doing
No.
it for those areas?
I spent 6 hours just manipulating the text in every possible different way that I could to prevent the 14-inch ballot, and it didn't happen. And the challenge is, additionally, with the cost of printing the longer ballot, but also those 14-inch ballots are more problematic in the active vote machine too. And they're bigger, they're
More jamming.
heavier for our election workers, we have to mail them out, so.
So through the chair, our request is not to address this service area issue. This issue is a huge issue. We've been working with Mr. Evans on it for at least 2 years and others. That issue just, it is what it is, and we'll deal with it as it becomes appropriate. We have a couple of little things we're working on. The issue that we need the policymakers to help us with is when a new service area ordinance comes on for the ballot, we need to really evaluate that and make sure that that's something that we really do want in April. And I think it's exactly like Mr. Evans said, we need to evaluate the cost, what is it gonna do to the ballot, how many voters are there in the service area? Is it urgent that it be done by April? Is there no other time? And then if the assembly would consult with us and we could sit down and make those decisions with the department that's proposing it, I think we'd have a better decision and more cost saving.
To the extent that the hillside is really an enormous problem for elections, and Jennifer and I have been working with Barbara and her staff, I think the better solution is to have anybody but Jennifer and I, or whoever replaces Jennifer, working with Barbara and her staff. I mean, there's 9 other assembly members. You can certainly outvote us on doing whatever you want with those people. But realistically, you guys could, do things that are less popular on the hillside more than the hillside representatives can. So just keep that in mind.
I just don't think they ought to have a vote. That's.
Well, let's let you deal with Kirkwood first, and then we'll see how this goes.
Anything else? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the.